Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded October 13th, 2021. Good evening, Franklin.
Good evening, Edward.
Hey, did you get a haircut?
No.
I mean,
I'm just looking at all these boxes, all these people that we have tonight. This is one of the largest crowds that we've had here.
And we're missing one. Our
He'll be back soon.
Well, he said he was coming. I talked to him earlier today. We have three hosts. We sort of rotate out. He said he'd be here. I don't know if you guys know Rod.
I got an email from him. He said he's going to miss tonight. So.
Oh, okay.
Rod won't be joining us tonight.
I haven't tried. So, what's going on, man? Did you do anything good this week, Franklin?
I've just been working. I'm actually just stopping meetings right now just to do this meeting. So, I have no clue what we're going to talk about tonight or any of that. So, I'm excited to see what all these people are here to talk about.
Well, this is why we have three hosts that we rotate through, so everybody get a chance, because working gets in the way of having fun, right? This is fun, right? I had an interesting week. I had a client that relied heavily on MCAS. MCAS is down for like a month in certain regions, and they finally are back up now, right? So any of the product group, this is not a slam on you. I'm just saying.
This is how Edward makes friends with the products groups. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need any trouble out of product groups, right? Bashing me. So it's just it was a long outage, and I finally signed up for the service health notifications. Like, wow, this has been going on. It rolled like across the nation and went back, and then it was one region in particular that just recently got it back up. And let me correct that. It was never down. It's just that the MDE to MCAS integration was broken. That's what it was. So you couldn't get device details, forensics, introspection, because that background integration was not there. So if you're familiar with MCAS, you're able to go on it.
So basically, people noticed this because they only had 1/50th of the alerts that they normally have to close, right?
Yeah, it was instead of being yeah, it is chatty. It ages out. So at MCAS, you get 7, 30, 90 days. I think that's the increments. No 60-day period. And there was no way to tell that this was happening until you start seeing, let's just say, 1,000 machines. And then 30 days out, you see less machines because they're aging out. Nobody's checking in, right? And so I went through everything, network communication, verified with the product group. MCAS doesn't talk directly to the internet. It's like, no, it's all back-end integration. There's no need. It tells MDE, Microsoft Defender for Identity, everything it needs to know. I said, so there's no external traffic. So we got to worry about tunnels. And finally, service health, oh, it's a knowledge. Okay, cool. So that was interesting. I also figured out how to know what region your MCAS tenant is in. Very easy to figure that out too. If you got MCAS to our listeners, Asif up in London, if you're still up, upper to the right, question mark about, it'll tell you what region you're in. Did not know that.
So I had this weird thing. I went into the compliance portal, and now there's this new thumbprint thing called privacy management. I don't know what that is.
Compliance is hard. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, man.
It seems like there's a new licensing requirement to do subject data requests sort of stuff. So I'm going to have to dig into it further. It's in preview, but yeah, that was a surprise to find in the portal out there.
In this period, just before we get to Ignite, I sort of just stay off, right? I did get access to some things that absolutely cannot talk about on the podcast. Even to Microsoft employees, that's going to be coming out in Ignite. It's pretty cool.
And they have the schedule out now for Ignite, so you can go sign up for everything. And
yeah, I did that already.
So that is available. Well, I'm interested in all these people here, Edward. I mean,
yeah,
who are these people?
These are people who will take bribes to come onto our show. And so I had the pleasure of witnessing Eric present amongst his peers in the security product presenters. And I'm like, oh man, that's pretty interesting, right? He gave an update. So I reached out to him first. And then I started, reaching out to some of his colleagues. Ricky Simpson is going to come on. Neer's going to come on. Cassia is going to come on. I think Raman is going to come on. Rand declined. He's just busy. Rachel, I think she said, because I'm really interested in Secure Score. Miss Broadbent left the company. So Carissa Broadbent. I'll get Tim on. They just got to chase Tim down, right? I've known Tim for a minute. Eugene, I think she said she would, and Angela Harris and I had a conversation. So I think we're batting over 300, 400 about guests. Most of them have committed to coming in next month because they're trying to get tonight and some go-to-market stuff. So with that being said, Eric, thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy schedule. I know it's busy. We're at this time of year, and night's coming up, go-to-market, still trying to shake off the sluggishness of Q1. And really get into it before the close of the year. So thank you for coming on and bringing your guests. Me introducing you will not do justice. So I'm going to start with Eric and go around the table. And so E and then M and then S, right? And then just introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself, what you do at Microsoft. And there, we'll have some questions. This is never a stump the chump type of show. We don't do that here, right? We're all about knowledge exchange. And if you see me looking down or looking away, I'm taking notes. If you're saying something, I'm maybe trying to follow it in the lab. Okay. So Eric, sir, tell the people who you are, what you do.
Thank you, Edward. Well, first off, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you in the audience today. It's a pleasure to be here. I've listened to a bunch of the podcasts in the past, and I'm a big fan. So, this was a no-brainer for me to join today. I'm the product marketing manager lead for DLP here at Microsoft. So that's the main area that I have. And I also take care of product marketing for another product that we'll talk about shortly. I think we have another podcast coming up on app governance. So those are the two main products that I cover. But today I'm here to speak with you along with my colleagues on DLP. And I'll pass it over to Mas now.
Hey there. Thanks for, just to kind of reiterate what Eric said, thanks for the invite and the opportunity to come speak today. Really looking forward to getting down into the business with you. My name's Mas Libman. I'm a project management lead on the Unified Data Loss Prevention team, where we deliver a variety of different solutions, including endpoint, Office 365, data loss prevention, and whatnot. We're part of the Microsoft Information Protection sort of team that delivers a variety of different types of solutions to help protect your data. Over to you, Shlomi.
Yes, thanks, Mas, and thanks, folks, for having me. My name is Shlomi Zrahia. I am actually from Israel, as you can probably guess out of my horrible accent, so I apologize in advance for that. I am the senior product manager for DLP endpoint here with Microsoft. I was actually joined recently, about 5 months ago, to manage our endpoint DLP solution, as well as other Microsoft products from the PM standpoint, like endpoint CASB for Shadow IT that we've been discussed about a few minutes ago, as well as some areas of Microsoft Insider Risk Management. I'm actually in the DLP business for the last 10 years across both sides of the house, vendors and deployments.
Very good. So gentlemen, thank you for your introductions. I'm taking notes so I know who to go bother when I have questions, right? You should have never told me what you do. In the interest of time, Franklin is a stickler for time, so we want to make sure that we have enough time to get through some questions that we may have for you, as well as have some open discussion about anything that you think is super cool. And by all means, if we do run over, take your time. We will not cut you off, all right? We'll run it and we'll take out the fluff, mostly me talking. So I'll start off with a series of questions. We'll jump back into it. DLP is one of those terms, but a lot of times people think DLP is a product. It's more of a process. So, if and I think that although all three of you work in DLP, you may have different perspectives. So I'll take turns picking people out. I'll start with you, Eric. What is DLP? You know, because we have listeners that are level 100 and we have listeners that are level up here. Give me your interpretation of DLP. What does that mean to our listeners and to our customers? We got customers listening too.
Of course, Edward. The way that prior to Microsoft, I was a Gartner analyst for a number of years, so about 13 years, and I used to cover DLP. And the way that I used to explain DLP was very much along the lines of what you mentioned, which is a technology bolstered by process internally. So DLP is really designed to protect your sensitive information. And it's also there to reduce the risks by applying content and context-based policies. So what I mean by that is content would be the type of data that it is. So it could be credit card data, healthcare data, that type of data, intellectual property, and context, which means how you are using that data at any given time. So are you printing the data? Are you copying it from one application to another? Are you trying to upload data or save it to a USB drive or print it or anything like that? So the idea is you build a policy based on the content and the context, and then you essentially set up activities to prevent inappropriate sharing, transfer, or use across different applications and services. So the idea is that you can deploy these policies to protect native and third-party solutions, and then manage everything together as part of our overall offering. So that's essentially what DLP is all about.
So one quick question, and we'll go to the next one. That's a good overview of what it is. I think I took notes. Technology bolstered by process.
Yes,
which I believe a lot of security and compliance, a lot of compliance is process, right? The technology could be useless if you don't have processes to give it teeth.
And it's actually the most important part, to be really clear, when you're looking at DLP, you can have the best technology, but if it's not supported by a good process internally, your DLP will not get anywhere. Like, for example, if you have policies that are set up to find regulatory compliance data, like credit card data, but you don't have a process for someone to review those events, then they're just going into nowhere. And if you don't have somebody not just to review, but to address those issues, then again, this thing is not being supported the way that it needs to.
So one of the buzzwords I'm hearing around, Mike, thank you for that. One of the buzzwords I'm hearing around Microsoft is this unified DLP stuff. Mr. Libman, what is this unified DLP, right? Because I remember a big announcement over a course of a year that telling people, if you're using, MIP, it's easy just to say, MIP, AIP, WIP, AEIOU, we're going to a unified classification and tagging, right? Give me some insight. What is this unified DLP that we're talking about?
So I think you touched on it actually very much. And as you mentioned, you have all of these different places and solutions that you maybe have used historically to manage and implement data loss prevention as a solution. And so unified DLP represents what I say is Microsoft's approach to how we're bringing all of those solutions together. So it's easier to manage, it's more coherent, comprehensive. So your protection is really applies everywhere where that sensitive data is roaming. You're not isolated to protecting data in one given place. We understand data has legs. It's going to move and roam across a number of different places. So really making sure that you have that right level of protection is the goal of unified DLP, to bring together all those places into a sort of a single place where you can get that visibility and get that control.
So that sounds great. I think that I'm starting to see more of the industry come around into, hey, let's try to create a security operations platform where I don't think we'll ever get to a single pane of glass, but let's reduce the amount of time we got to swivel in our chairs and a number of products. Because, Franklin's a pen tester. In my days that I fancied myself one, the way that we find our ways around inside your product, even though you have best of breed, is because of lack of integration. So when we're talking about this unified DLP, this question is for Shlomi. Did I say your name right, sir?
That's exactly that.
Okay. What's the lift? How do customers get this? How do they say, oh, we're a consumer, and let's just assume, I'm just going to assume that we're talking about our E5 customers who've decided to consume the SKU all up. And I think there may be an additional SKU for compliance. It was free now, but I think you got to buy. I saw something in Compliance Manager. Tell me, what's the lift to be able to get customers to this unified DLP?
So it's very easy. First of all, we've mentioned that earlier. Customers have told us that with the traditional DLP solutions, they really struggling in applying those different DLP controls across all the workloads they have. Workloads might be endpoint, might be network, might be cloud. We're gonna speak about it later on. And as a result, they were actually required multiple DLP solutions to address this requirement. So for our customers, and for your question, Edward, it's very easy. You are just entering to our compliance portal. You are just clicking on the DLP screens, and then you can configure your policy once, enable it everywhere, and then get back as an administrator and manage your incidents exactly from the same place. So speaking about cost of ownership, speaking about return of investments, this is great.
So it sounds like this unified DLP is going to be in the same portal that our users are used to our customers are used to going into now. So the next question goes off to Maz is in a design approach, what's the pre-work, right? Suppose I'm only consuming one piece of your information protection suite. I'm using AIP, but I'm not necessarily using MIP. Is WIP still a thing?
It still exists out there. Yes.
Okay. So
part of your information protection suite. So, yeah.
So what's the approach to designing this out? Because I remember back in the day when I was brave, I took on an AIP project. It lasted forever, right? Trying to get it done. What's the approach on what's the term that I don't like using, frankly? Best practices. What's the best practice of trying to consume? Oh, let me ask a more important question. So say that. That's A. That's B. When is this unified DLP available?
So two questions there. One, the easy one. When and where is this available? It's available now. Actually, it's available. If you're an M365 customer, you have of course the appropriate license. You can log into the Compliance Center and start to create policies, start to protect data. And we've worked really hard to make sure that we've done the heavy lifting for you. We have the service set up so your data is protected the minute it gets uploaded to SharePoint, the minute your users are sharing it over email. Our DLP solution sort of available, already built into all those places, so that you just need to turn on your policies. You can start to protect that data. Even before you turn on policies, you can start to get insights into how is sensitive data being used in my organization. So you can get that visibility that's super critical to, of course, making sure data is protected correctly. Now, I think getting to your first question, which is like, how do I get started? What if I've started over here? What if I've started over there? I think it's a common challenge many of our customers face, and we hear that a lot. And we've really strived within our solution to make sure that it leverages those investments that you've made so that you're able to build on that. So take AIP labels as an example. If you start to deploy AIP, you have labeled content in your organization. It's super easy in a DLP policy. We've already done the integration, so you can pick that label. It's called a sensitivity label now, but you can pick that exact same label. You can reference it in your policy without doing any additional setup. We know what that label looks like on that content, so it's really easy for you to create that policy that will trigger based upon, as I mentioned, already labeled documents and data. We've focused not only on that unified labeling aspect, but also on the underlying data classification layer itself. So as you're analyzing those files, as we're scanning them and identifying what is sensitive, it's the same engine that's running across all those different places. So when you teach Exchange, hey, this is what my PII data looks like, it's super easy. You just toggle a switch and you can say, I want to apply that to my endpoint too. So again, as you built up this investment in what is your data and how you want to protect it, our solution's really designed to make it easy for you to extend that and make sure that protection is comprehensive. It's across all those different places where sensitive data is stored.
I'm one of the weird guys. Go ahead, Franklin.
So let me jump in here and let's go back to some basics for some people starting out with DLP. So basically, I can take a file, and if I'm emailing it, I can make sure it's encrypted based upon if there's sensitive information in it. I mean, go back to the basics of what this is actually doing for people that don't understand the actual specific use cases that I'm talking about here. Can you do that?
Sure, let's step through that. So let's say you have a file that has credit card information in it.
Okay.
So what we can do is we can build a DLP policy that identifies that content, and we can do that one of two ways. One is we can build a rule within DLP that has information with regards to the structure of what the credit card number is, or we can go another way, which is what Moz was mentioning just a minute ago, which is we can actually assign labels using MIP to that content. So when the document is created or when it's edited, we can apply a label that says credit card information. Now, DLP smart enough.
In those sensitive info types, you have many out of the box already set up.
Yeah, there's over 150 different information types. And we keep adding new information types as we roll things out, and also new ways to classify and identify data. In fact, we're going to be rolling out a lot of this new stuff over the next few months.
And those info types work across all, there's, Australia data types, or, so it's worldwide for the different types that we're talking about here.
Absolutely. Like I said, we've got over 150 of them, and they address the most common info types. So like you were saying, whether it's a driver's license in Australia or Canada or the US or in Germany, or tax IDs, social security numbers or social insurance numbers, all those things. We've got loads and loads of different classifiers for that. And so again, you can pick and choose how you want to build your DLP policy. If you have the data already classified and you're using a classifier, you can just import that as part of the DLP policy. So you use that as a starting point. Or again, you can define the information type if you don't have a classification label assigned to it. And then what happens is then you build what I was referring to initially, which is the context around how you want that policy to be enabled. So for example, let's focus on an endpoint just as a starting place. If you have a user that opens up a document on an endpoint, maybe it's perfectly okay for them to open up that document. However, you don't want them to print that document because it may contain sensitive information. It could contain intellectual property or PII data or some other form of sensitive data. So the DLP policy would be invoked when the user attempts to, let's say, print the document. It would be reviewed, and then there would be a toast that would pop up at the bottom and say, hey, you're about to print something and this is against company policy. We can provide some context for what the DLP policy is. And then given, depending on the type of offense that we're looking at, the administrators also have one more option that they can define, which is, do I want to allow this user to override this policy in given circumstances? And whereas in other cases, you may say, I don't want the user to override this. I absolutely don't want them to print this document at home on their home printer. I don't know where that document's going to end up. And so that's what a DLP policy is. And that's what DLP does. So it monitors all of these different channels. So it monitors USB, copying USB. It monitors printing. It monitors file uploads to the cloud. It monitors copying, pasting content from one document to another.
So if somebody happens to if somebody gets the file out into the wild, right? And somebody tries to open this Excel sheet of my customer data, and there's DLP applied here, will that be encrypted so they can't see it? Or how can someone see that file that's loose in the wild? Or is it just stopping it from going out the door?
So DLP as a technology just itself is would be used to prevent this file from leaking out the door, from exiting in an inappropriate way. Now, there are additional controls that we have within the Microsoft ecosystem that would that you can invoke to say, well, if you want to share this file, then this file must be encrypted, as an example. So there are additional workflows that are available. And again, all of that is driven through MIP. And if Moz wants to add anything to that, he can provide more context.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. I think
I have a question for Moz.
Sure.
I'm a weird guy. I'm one of the 10 people on the planet that uses Linux as their day-to-day desktop. Does it work? Does the solution work against Linux, Mac? I don't think there are any more OSs out there that are mainstream. Can this solution work on those particular? I'm more concerned about does the technology work on where the data resides rather than a type of data. So can I use it across platforms?
You have iOS and Android too. Don't forget about those.
Yeah, they're mobile. But yeah, you got Mac OS. Did I say it? Mac? I got a Mac too. So
Mhm.
tell me about non-Microsoft landing points for the data. Can this technology still be leveraged to enforce the process that is leveraging technology? Can I do it?
So we're built in and available today in Windows, super easy to set up and deploy. We definitely recognize and hear from our customers loud and clear. They use alternative operating systems. We're built into Edge. We also have a Chrome plugin because we know customers also use alternate browsers to share and access sensitive data. I can't quite disclose yet, where everywhere that we're going, but I am super excited very shortly to be able to tell you more about some of the places that we're coming and where we're bringing DLP to address exactly those kinds of problems where users are of course on different types of devices where they're accessing, where they're storing that sensitive data. I will mention, in addition to those local devices, of course, if your data is stored in SharePoint, if it's in OneDrive, if it's in email, it doesn't matter what your OS device is because that data is protected in the cloud already. So in a sense, you already have that protection that's extending to those different types of devices, even ones that we haven't even thought of yet, as far as ensuring that sensitive data stays protected as you keep it within your control.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's nothing you can talk about until November 2nd through the 4th.
Something around that November date.
Something like that, right?
Some interesting things for us to talk about. Yes.
And I think understanding that there are I won't say outliers because they would assume that the 800-pound gorilla. Why are the gorillas always 800 pounds? Is that like the ultimate fighting weight? I never figured it out. Why not a 1,000-pound gorilla or 250-pound if he's really fit? Don't know. But the next question is for Shlomi. We got the perception that this is still not a very heavy lift for our E5 customers. They can get inside the portals that they're used to. Do you have any specific ways? Is this tenant and subscription aware, or do I have to go to individual projects, Shlomi, around Teams, SharePoint? Because Teams especially, Teams administrators that you talk to in a while act like they just have the worst life in the world, right? Like, why are people putting documents inside this, right? It's not built for that. Like, yes, it is. So, Shlomi, tell me, how hard it is to get this stuff to turn on for someone who's already consuming SPO, Teams, OneDrive, and Edge is sort of, this is just a browser, right? Edge is not the 800-pound gorilla in the browser. But how do I get that going?
Great question, Edward. So the beauty of our unified DLP, as we discussed earlier, is that it's not an integrated solution. It's a real unified solution. You are entering to our portal once, and with one simple toggle, you can enable your DLP controls to your workloads, to your Microsoft workloads, as well as other workloads which are not Microsoft workloads. For example, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. We mentioned Edge, Office. All those are Microsoft pure services that are easily enabled within our DLP controls. But you can also do it in any other cloud service using our cloud connectors within MCAS. And finally, the endpoint. All those can be enabled easily from one list via one click on a toggle. And as we mentioned earlier, you can, as a customer, define your sensitive information types once. Sensitive information types are actually what define the customer's sensitive information. And then you can use and enable those policies in any workload I've just mentioned. So for your question, Edward, it's easy. It's very, very easy.
Mm-hmm. Great. So
I got some
Franklin is the MDE heavy. I'm an MCAS heavy. We share the brain share on Sentinel and a few other things.
Right where I was going with this.
Right where I was going with this. So
my question is first of all, is MCAS a security product or a compliance product?
So are you asking from a security definition or are you asking from a Microsoft business definition? I mean, these are two other things, but I think that for the purpose of the technical solution, MCAS is doing both security as compliance. We have a malware purposes that we can enable controls within MCAS as well as data protection and information protection controls. So I would say it's doing both and doing both great.
All right. So that was a trick question that we go back
He
and
was
forth
trying
on.
to win a bet. That's what was going on.
So
Oh, you guys, if you haven't
exactly.
listened to some
All
of the
right.
previous episodes, you don't know.
So what is the, should I just be using file policies and MCAS, or should I be using DLP policies, or where do these two play together? And how should I make that happen?
Anyone can answer.
I can start, and then I'll let Maz jump in. So I think it depends on the again, going back to the word I used earlier, it depends on the context of use and also the content. What you can do with MCAS, I mean, it's practically unlimited. There are loads and loads of different things that you can do with MCAS, just as a basic, just a basic environment with all the variables that you have options for you. So what you can do is you can, depending on the content or context, you can say, well, MCAS is going to be great just to block or prevent certain activities from occurring, and preventing the users themselves from doing certain things within MCAS with these third-party applications. So you can control an awful lot about that user's activity and behavior within with MCAS within all of these third-party applications, whether that's Google or any of the, I think they're up to 20 some odd thousand different apps that we support now with MCAS. But if you want to have more contextual control, this is where DLP can come in and offer that really nice fine-grained control, where you can say, for example, a user is interacting with, let's say, a Box or Dropbox, and they're syncing files to Box and Dropbox. Well, maybe it's perfectly fine for them to sync their normal everyday desktop files that they use to Box or Dropbox. However, when it comes to very sensitive content, whether that's intellectual property or regulatory compliance data or something else, we don't want that data to go out. And so now you can be very granular with regards to the application of a policy. So you can define this content cannot go to Box. Maybe it's okay to go to Dropbox, or maybe it's the reverse, but it's not allowed to go to the other ones. So now you have ultimate control over the content. So it depends on what kind of fine-grained controls you're looking for.
You said the word integrated 3 times. So when you say integrated, it explains why is that important to a customer? What does the customer?
Sure.
Yeah, the customer. What do they have to do? Is this just transparent to them?
It is.
Okay.
It is, and that's why I over-indexed on that word, and I apologize. But the reality is, when you're looking at traditional solutions like DLP solutions, they're standalone solutions, and what they have to do is they have to, like, as a customer, you have to build the integration between this component and this component. You're responsible for that as a customer. So ultimately, if you want to enforce a policy, you want to enforce a workflow, you want to enforce whatever it is that you're doing, it's your responsibility as the customer to say, I need this application to understand what my DLP is doing, because I need it to do certain actions or certain protective measures. What we've done as part of this unified DLP approach, the way that Microsoft's laid it out, is that all of that is transparent. It's built in, it's fully built in. And that maybe that's the better word to use. It's fully built into all of these services that we have. So MCAS, for example, there's an option within MCAS to go in and define a DLP policy. You don't have to bolt a DLP component from a third party to MCAS to do the work that you needed to do. Just like we were talking about, Maz mentioned, email, and Shlomi mentioned, OneDrive and SharePoint. You don't need to go to these properties and then install another thing, or having a redirect. A lot of the DLP DLP solutions require some form of a redirect so that their DLP engine can scan the content in OneDrive or SharePoint, which means you're hauling an awful lot of traffic back and forth to these other systems just to do the inspection. The advantage of our solution is it's all built in. So it's integrated. You don't need to backhaul stuff. There's no worries about maybe a connection drops and then stuff makes it through, because that's a problem that can happen, especially when you're leveraging proxies or connectors along the way. So the fact that everything is all integrated all into one means that all of the DLP solutions that we have can be managed and maintained seamlessly. So it doesn't impact productivity, it doesn't impact workflow, and it doesn't impact the users either, because again, it's built in. So one of the feedbacks we've gotten a lot from customers is when they're using traditional DLP solutions, this idea of the end user being made aware that something's going on, they're not allowed to do something, that can be very jarring for them. What we've done is we made it really simple. In a lot of the applications that we have, it's actually integrated as part of the ribbon, the notification, or it's the toast that they're familiar with. So you don't have to retrain users. They're already familiar with Windows toasts and ribbon bars.
So let me ask you, you know, we've got these sensitive info types. Is it just straight up, you know, credit card numbers? I mean, what are the different types of ways that you can classify the data for working with DLP? I mean, can you just give like a database of information or keywords that you're looking for? I mean, can you create your own sensitive info types? I mean, how broad do you go in being able to classify for DLP?
Mods should probably take this one.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm eager to jump in on this one. It's a good question. Yeah, so as Eric mentioned, we have over 150 built-in sensitive information types that are sort of designed to help get everybody started with those common types of sensitive data that's related to either regions or common regulations, finance, medical, privacy-related, you know, classes of data. So we provide that out of the box, and actually that gives a lot of the underpinnings for the engine that customers can fully customize to create your own unique sensitive type. So you can start with the ones we built. We built a credit card and an SSN classifier. Well, maybe you have a slightly different format that you'd like to exclude from the SSN match. Well, you can customize what we've built out of the box, so it's easy to fine tune and adjust that. Or you can, you know, kind of push our classifiers out of the way and get really into the weeds and fully customize this. There's have a variety of different functions that are included. There's proximity matches and dictionaries, and of course, pattern matching and full regex. There's unique deduping and a bunch of other things within the system that we provide to help really pinpoint and precisely match. Well, did I find a credit card? Did I find 5 credit cards? So those are some of the canonical examples for structured and formatted data. We also have customers coming to us, of course, that have, you know, medical databases that contain a rich set of PII data where they have more precise, what we know as exact data match requirements. And similarly, our classification engine's able to tie together the PII data that an organization may be able to need to protect and actually couple that with a policy so that it precisely matches and detects when a given user's PII data is included in content. You can actually detect that and then apply what are the controls that are needed. You know, I think mentioned earlier around encryption. Well, using DLP, you can actually detect, well, is this document that has this PII data been encrypted and enforce the right action or prevent it from leaking out? And then I guess the last, or one of the other sort of recent investments that we've been making is around trainable classifiers, which is, again, it's another part of our MIP suite of how you can specify what sensitive data. So across that MIP suite, data loss prevention being one of them, we're able to leverage this trainable classifiers technology. And that's really designed to have, you know, take the heavy lifting out of defining what is sensitive. It lets the organization feed in the system a bunch of documents or a bunch of classifications of documents. Okay. And we will, based upon that analysis, then identify things like that. And sort of really, you know, there's no longer needing to do a regex pattern match with the proximity match. Just feed the documents in, let the power of training really identify and pinpoint that and create the classifier for you.
Mm-hmm. So let me say one more thing. So there's like DLP policies, retention policies, retention label policies, label policy. I mean, how do all these, obviously the sensitive info types, I understand how that plays into it to classify, but how do all of those 3 areas play together? Can you is there like, hey, I can set a retention on this document if there's a DLP policy set to it, or vice versa? How do all of those play together?
I'd say the way that we've designed the solution is to make sure that all of the work that an organization has put in to pinpoint and identify what is this content, that is common and pervasive. That's that classification platform that we provide. But when it comes to enforcing different outcomes, what we hear from customers is different personas, different organizations, or, you know, different divisions within an organization that are responsible for enforcing a data retention policy or performing a need discovery query against, you know, for some legal case, or turning on a data loss prevention policy to prevent, you know, sensitive data from leaking out. So we've invested heavily to make sure that detection, everybody leverages and benefits from that classification accuracy, and everybody that fine tunes, everybody else, takes advantage of those investments. But the policies and the outcomes that you enforce are designed to be managed by properly isolated, so they can be managed by the right persona. So that's really kind of in the how and why we've designed them that way. And it's really based upon what we see on how organizations actually deploy and manage these, and how it aligns best to their processes that they have in place.
So is it safe to say
And I was
that
just going to say,
DLP
the other thing to keep in mind is that you have different personas, right? So you may have one group of people that are looking to enforce a data loss prevention policy. So they're concerned with sensitive data that way, preventing its leakage. But you may have another group that is responsible for the whole data lifecycle, where what they're concerned with is making sure that data is retired at the right time, or maybe is available for an audit or some type of legal discovery. And that's where those labels are. There are different labels there to address different constituencies within the organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So is it safe to say that DLP, once again, is the process that allows you to leverage AIP, MIP, or WIP? Out of those, I don't know if you can say it, it's like Highlander. There can only be one, right? So can you guys at liberty to say what's going to be the new nomenclature, or is it going to be wait till November when we do all our acronyms reshuffle? And that's a good answer. You can say, hey, Ed, you got to wait, because I'm trying to figure out if we're still selling and marketing AIP, Azure Information Protection, for our listeners, quit using acronyms, Edward, WIP, Windows Information Protection. I can count the people that know how to use that. And Microsoft Information Protection, which I'm starting to hear a whole lot about. Hey, this is where we want to go, because it seems to be more closely tied to the endpoint. Which one? Do I have to buy them all, or do I just buy one? Is it the same SKU? I mean, where do I insert myself to get into the game? Do I buy one or the other? Shlomi, that'd be your question, sir. And then I have a question right after this, Shlomi. I always have one off the wall question. I did a random chose, and Shlomi, you're gonna get the crazy off the wall question.
So I will let Mas to answer the packaging and the licensing question in a second. But I want to discuss about, does DLP is a service, is a program, and how AIP and rights management technologies are complementary to DLP, which is the base and the root of your question, Edward. And I think that's what's important. And I would say that first, data protection, as we mentioned earlier, the goal is to make sure that sensitive data will not leak out of the customer environment. And AIP is absolutely complementary to that. It's a great tool to enable our customers to save and protect their organization, while they can put DLP controls based on the AIP label. And that's why it's complementary. It's not a must, it's an option. And this way, you can let some of your data get out of your organization, but make sure it's still protected out there, while DLP controls, as part of the DLP policy, make sure that the data itself will not leak generally if the customer don't want it to be leaked. That's why AIP is complementary. That's why DLP and AIP should be, and they are, the best friends. And that's why they are working together so good. Now, in terms of packaging AIP versus WIP, as well as Microsoft Information Protection, I think Mas here is our professional.
Well, let me ask you one more off the wall question.
Please.
I don't know how familiar you are with the actual, it sounds like these protections are encryption in transit. Okay. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between this and ransomware? Suppose I put this on here, and then, and there's no right answer. This is just one of, I always ask one. If I'm encrypting this data and I'm putting labels, classification, encryption in transit, does that give you some type of DLP immunity, that if someone tried to ransomware one of the files, that file is more resistant to it? Or is it totally separate the way it operates?
So no, it's totally. You won't be a ransomware immune as a result of AIP labeled files. I mean, think about it as think about it. You know what? Let's do that. Think about it as two locks, all right? Once a content or a file is being encrypted, is locked once. And then if there will be an AIP label, you can consider it as the first lock. And then if yet there is a ransomware program, consider it as the second lock. So you can't really get your source if you don't release or unlock both locks, right? That's why these are two different things, Edward, for your question. So we cannot consider AIP files that are labeled as ransomware immune.
Okay. And just, I've had that question before. Like if I encrypt something once, can I double encrypt it? And I'm like, yeah, can you buy more than one
Yes.
insurance policy? I'm sure you can, right? You just layer more. I don't know why you need
Absolutely.
15 of them.
Yeah, how many envelopes can you stuff into one envelope, right?
I know, right? And how much pain can you take every November?
There are like you can actually wrap stuff in encryption, and then so you have customer key or double encryption, I guess they call it, or
Exactly.
something like that.
Yeah, I've seen the term double encryption, but that seemed to be more deliberate. Like that was a feature of double encryption.
Yeah.
So Miles,
So
you had part two of the question. Go ahead.
Sorry, Edo, I just want to
I'm sorry.
say one thing before. I mean, speaking about ransomware, yes, those files will probably not be ransomware immune, but if an hacker is trying to take this data as a result of human-operated ransomware, or another hacker somehow hacked to a company A or company X, and is now trying to access an AIP encrypted file, that will be great for the company and bad for the hacker, because this hacker won't be able to access those files as those files will be encrypted. So in some way, you can consider AIP files as ransomware immune from the side of data protection, but not from the side of the data file lost in case he has no backup. Sorry.
I get it. You're talking about the way that it helps you in the event that you are being compromised, data exfiltration and making sure that the data that is extracted is useless, right? So for those who take the data, not that I was ever a ransomware proprietor, my tactics was to get in, get the data, get it out. And then once I made sure I had a good copy on both sides, I ransom yours and your copy's no good, but it's a stalemate. Yep, I can't get to it and you can't get to it either.
Yeah, so, I mean, in today's ransomware attacks, if you recall some of the latest ransomware attacks, usually the hackers are actually sharing some of the files that they stole from the customer publicly, and by that they are trying to enforce the customer to pay them, right? In case those files are AIP protected, he won't be able to push those customers to pay sooner because the customer will be fully protected with those files. So yes, they can be publicly shared. Who cares? Protected by Microsoft,
good point.
Right?
That's a good point. In the layman's way is you can't data blackmail me by saying I'm going to release it to the wild. That's exactly. A very good point. So that lowers the leverage or the negotiation edge that these corporations like Evil and a few others have to do. That's a very good point. And think about that, right? So you can go, I'm going to leak your data. Who cares? Matter of fact, if you give it to someone and AIP calls back home, I know where it is. I can check it out where it is. So, I got some notes here that I want to go over, and I'm going to ask a question on top of a question. And I'll start once again, Shlomi, I'll start with you. What is coherent, and how is it different from one thing that's fallen on my plate that I got to do some research on is preview? Are they the same thing or they're different?
So, customers always told us that many of the DLP solutions they used at different user experience across different environments. Microsoft Unified DLP solution was designed to provide a consistent DLP enforcement experience that is familiar, easy to use, and learned by information workers.
Okay, so their experience is that there is some interaction from the customer side if necessary, but is at a very minimal. What's the administration own load for the person that's having to administrate this? I know that there are data types sensitive data types that are already built in. What about policies? How many
So
policies?
So yes, it's very depending in different from one customer to another. Think about the most popular DLP customers. They usually have a combination of regulations like PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, and some of very specific projects to their organization. Let's call it Project X documents that they would like to protect. So with Microsoft DLP solution, we are providing out-of-the-box policies exactly for those regulations I just mentioned. With a quick wizard, next, finish wizard, each customer can simply deploy these regulations control and policies, including both policies and sensitive information types. And finally, he can build his own Project X policies on top of those easily by simply pulling the sensitive information type with the words and the content that defined to be part of Project X to be protected within the same policies. That's usually how it looks like for an onboarding DLP customer.
That makes sense. So with DLP, are you guys, and I'll say this to the open discussion in the end, because I want to ask about something that started been really popping up all over, and I don't operate in it, which is purview or purview, but we'll save it toward the end. So in the industry, whomever wants to take the question, I'll ping back to Eric. What is the most receptive industry, in your opinion, of this? I used to do work in pharma, and you're talking about IP. I've been walked out of a place before because of a USB drive. So what is the industry, I'll start with you, Eric, that is most receptive for this to show immediate impact, whether it be superficial or speculative, because auditors just need to see that you're doing something, or something that it can be measured to say, wow, we didn't know we had these type of DLP instances. And because one of the big instances when I used to do this stuff was customers' backups with DLP. You're doing these backups and they're not encrypted. You just had a DLP event, right? Anybody can get to the storage medium had it. So what industry, Eric, is like, yeah, we need somebody. So I don't care whose it is.
Yeah, so typically the biggest industries that are attracted to using DLP are the ones that have a lot of regulatory compliance data. That's your sweet spot overall, because they have rules and regulations that tell them very prescriptively what is allowed and what is not allowed to be shared, right? So can you share someone's medical record? Absolutely not. That would be any medical environment would be highly regulated. You can think of like a hospital, an insurance company, those types of organizations. Another highly regulated industry is finance. They have all of your personal information, whether it's your credit card data or your mortgage information or your banking records. They have all of that, and they can't share that outside the organization. In fact, if you're communicating with your bank about maybe doing like a mortgage renewal, they'll probably use a secure email portal to share the file individually just with you, so that it's not shared over the internet. It's shared over a very specialized portal. And DLP is a big asset for those organizations because they can then lock down that content. They say, in these cases, it's okay to share the content, but in these other cases, it isn't. So again, healthcare, big industry, finance, insurance companies. And then outside of that, any firm that has a lot of intellectual property. You're mentioning pharma, but it could be an engineering firm. It could be a contract manufacturer, for example, that is receiving a lot of sensitive content to build something on behalf of a customer. And they need to create distinctions between this customer's data and this customer's data. And in a lot of cases, the people that are associated with the data, they can't view the other customer's data because that could be a breach of contract in itself. So those are the types of industries that are typically the most interested in DLP.
This question is a dual question between Maz and Shlomi. So when we look at users, well, I want to talk about industries a little bit. So actually, go back to the notes. I'm writing notes in advance. What is the parity between commercial and government? I used to cover Fed space and regulatory industries. And one thing to get me beat over my head was like, why are you showing all this and I can't get it? Right? Where's the parity between GCC Hive, FedRAMP, GovCloud, AirGap Cloud, right? Which is sort of oxymoron, AirGap Cloud. Moz, can I buy it? Because I have recently started encountering more customers that have 365 commercial and 365 government or GCC or FedRAMP. Can I get the same type of parity between my products?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, yes. I think our goal, as you've likely seen, is that, and even over the last, 6 months, we've tried to make I think a good concerted effort to make sure that all of the solutions that we've been traditionally providing in our commercial cloud are also available to the Gov Cloud. Endpoint DLP is actually just the last 2 months, we released that into the Gov Cloud. And, from this point forward, we're happy to keep that at parity with what we have or what you've been used to using in commercial. So, there's a little bit of work to kind of catch up with some places where we haven't been there, but the goal is that you don't have to make a decision if you're in a special cloud versus not, or on what capabilities that you have available. As I said.
So Shlomi, the other thing would be, why wouldn't someone do this, right? Even if you're not being controlled by an external framework such as PCI, HIPAA. My biggest exposure to DLP was literally a decade ago. I was doing work for a company that had to adhere to ITAR. Oh yeah, that was a different experience for Ouellet here, right? Being able to do that. So, but I'll go back to this. So Shlomi, what to my last question? Why wouldn't a customer adopt this? I know we talked about implementation lift effort. What are the blockers that you would see that would prevent somebody from adopting this, other than unwillingness to do it? If there are any.
Yeah, so let's park the blockers for a second and let's speak about why customers that are not under regulation are adopting DLP today. And this is not a question, this is a fact. We know that many of our customers are adopting DLP when they are not even under any kind of regulation. And let's take one example. For example, customers who are implementing and delivering software to the market, how they can control their source code leak. The DLP controls are super important to make sure this code will not be leaked. And there is no regulation for such thing. It's purely customer concern to protect their sensitive source code and their intellectual property. That's one reason. Another reason is, not just for regulation and data protection perspective, not always DLP controls are being implemented because of a worry from a malicious user or an employee that is about to leave a company, and now the customer is really worried that this employee will still hold the data a day before he's leaving the company. It's not just that. I mean, workers, especially workers that are exposed to the sensitive information, are under a lot of pressure. We are all working so hard. And tell me, Edward, how many times did you send 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. email? I mean, I am in Israel right now. It's 1 a.m. for me, and I'm here with you in this podcast. And I'm probably going to send at least 1 or 2 emails later on. Sometimes I do a human mistakes. Sometimes I send the wrong email or the wrong file to the wrong audience. And that's exactly where DLP getting into the picture and protect those human mistakes. So it's not always about malicious users. It's not always about regulated customers. There are many, many reasons to adopt DLP. Now, you also mentioned blockers, Edward. Would you like me to speak about what are the potential blockers for customers? That was the question. Can you please keep me honest over here?
You're very honest. Tell me what a potential blocker so that I can become a better seller in the field, right? And enable my customers.
So blockers from a customer perspective, what actually can slow them down in the DLP journey? I will put it this way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there are a couple of things. First, I would say definitely honest and transparent that DLP is not an easy product to implement and deploy versus other security products. Now here with Microsoft, we have made so many things to make it much easier, and I'm gonna name those. But traditionally, DLP had considered at least 6 months program, because with DLP you had to build your policies from scratch, build your classifications from scratch, deploy agents on every endpoint within your organization, understand and make some homework within internal homework within your different departments, finance, HR, sales, what considered as sensitive information for each one of them. Make some technical testing to make sure all those controls that have been deployed to each endpoint or any other workloads are not slowing down or having compatibility issues with other third parties on each endpoint. All those things can be considered as things that will slow down the deployment. However, and that's exactly why we have took this unified DLP approach here at Microsoft. We just mentioned we are providing out-of-the-box policies to reduce the return of investment and increase the return of investment and reduce the time it takes for customers to build the policies and classification. Our DLP controls are integrated to our workloads, including Windows, by the way. No further agents need to be installed. And all those things are exactly the main pain points that reduce the time and the blockers that had previously customers had experienced.
This question will go back to that. You answered some very good questions from a technical standpoint, and as well as a process and understanding that this is the work that has to be done. But let me give you this scenario. And I don't want to ever slight anybody's title position, because God knows I don't know what I do. But I am finding the CIOs who want to act in this manner of data protection are wanting, inefficient, insufficient. And to my knowledge, that in a regulatory framework that I operate in, GDPR, I do believe that one of the requirements is to have a DPO or a DPM. Would you recommend that for a customer that says, yes, you have a CIO who's ultimately responsible for the integrity and fidelity of the data, right? He's accountable for it, not responsible. The people below him are responsible for it. Do you think that it requires to have a successful DLP initiative and framework that you have a dedicated data protection officer or data protection manager? Somebody can oversee this, because I think that if you assign this to an engineer, you assign it to an architect, you assign it to PwC, they're going to come in and charge $500 an hour, right? To tell you what you know. Eric, should I have a DPO or DPM or something? I'll take the D out. No, you gotta have D.
Sure.
Well, you know what? How about this? I take the D out because I'm always trying to change something. Instead of having a DPO, we have an IPO, an information protection officer, and then an IPM, an information protection manager. I'm gonna make myself a title up. Should I have one?
I think it depends on the context of the environment, and the reality is that role, it doesn't have to be a standalone role. For some larger organizations, it makes a lot of sense to have a standalone role that has that responsibility. But in pretty much every customer environment that we talk with, they have that function either assigned to someone, and that could be someone on the legal side, for example, or maybe they have a chief risk officer who has responsibility or partial responsibility for part of that. And so the idea there is that the duties for that individual are somewhere within the organization. It depends if they're all, like I said, if the organization is large enough, they may actually coalesce around a specific role. But you can't step away from it. Somebody ultimately has to make those decisions.
Yeah, I get it. I'm ex-military. I totally understand the difference between accountability and responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
My commanding officer explained that to me one time.
So let me ask you this. If I create a DLP policy and I activate it, then it could impact the entire organization. Is there any way for me to see how this is going to impact the organization?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you have to keep in mind is you want to test these policies before you ever invoke them in the real world. And one of the ways that you can do that is you can actually deploy the policy in monitor mode only, in which case it's completely silent to the end users. They don't see any pop-ups, they don't see any activity, but on the back end, you actually get all the reports of all of the activities that were triggered, that triggered that particular DLP policy. So then you can fine tune the DLP policy over time. So what you can do is you can start off and say, oh, well, maybe we over-indexed on this type of information or this particular variable because it's given us a whole ton of false positives. Let's tweak that back a little bit. Let's roll it back and let's deploy it again. And then let's see how it's working in the field. And that way you get a good balance, right? You want to find a just middle when you get enough false positives that you're not missing stuff, but not too many false negatives where you are missing stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea of deploying the policy, again, we've got three ways. One of them is in monitor mode. The other one is in pure block mode, which would just block the activity and preclude the user from doing anything. And the third mode is block with override. So then you're giving the option to the end user to actually override the policy. And that could be something, for example, let's say we need to share data with a partner. We're the finance office. We normally have a process to upload files to a OneDrive. However, the partner that we're working with, their OneDrive account is locked for some reason, but they need the financial files from us. So we have decided as a team, we're willing to take the risk. We're going to give you, Frank, this USB drive. We trust you because Edward says you're trustable. So, we're trustworthy, so we'll trust you. I don't know if I should trust Edward for saying that, but we'll give him the privilege, right? So then we try to put the data on the USB drive. Everybody in the team, including maybe the CFO, says that's what we need to do. Well, DLP policy in this case would have the ability, again, if you configured it that way, to give you the user the override option. Say, yes, in this case, my manager approved it. You can even write down a whole scenario to explain who was the authorizer, why, and all of that would be documented as part of the DLP policy.
Excellent. So have you seen the SC 400 certification? What do you think about it and the learning content behind it?
I knew that was coming. You guys don't know the backstory. So a lot of these exams that you're seeing, either the content on Learn, that's the person to blame right there.
No. I did the SC 200 content, but I was
no.
I was part of the JTAs for SC 200.
Is you and that Brandon Needs troublemakers? You guys are on my list.
So
speaking of which, I got my results back.
I'm very familiar with SC 400 and the content. So I find that people should not be. I find the whole compliance area confusing just by the names of the different policies, right? But once you actually understand everything that's going on, I think it's actually very simple to implement. And there are the safety nets there, like putting things in monitor mode and so on. So I don't think that people should be scared to do this. I think that they need to jump in and see how it works. I think the SC 400 content that you can get from Learn is excellent. And it's a good place to start. Now, we have Ignite coming up that we talked about. Are there any sessions that you're presenting at, number one, number two, that we should be going to, and number three, any announcements that you can tell us about beforehand? So where anything that you can clue us into.
Sure. So I'll answer the first question because I think that's the simplest question to answer. Yes, we do have a session at Ignite, and it will actually cover three technologies that we touched on today. It will cover Microsoft Information Protection and all the big announcements that they're introducing at Ignite. We will have a section that will cover all the big announcements for DLP, and we will also have a section that will cover Microsoft Information Governance. Because all those are related, right? Again, with one policy, you can activate different workflows for each of these things, and to help better manage and control your environment. I think we gave some strong hints earlier that there's going to be some really cool stuff being announced at Ignite. I wish I could disclose more today, but we're 2 weeks away, and we've got a big party planned for Ignite. And we want to make sure that everybody gets their glass of champagne for all the work that they've done at Ignite. So I'm going to caution a little bit on that, but yeah, lots of good stuff, and it's only 2 weeks away, so we'll have some cool stuff coming up.
So I have 2.5 more questions, and this is for the roundtable, right? We'll start at Shlomi, and then we'll work up through Maz. We'll go to Eric. So DLP, once again, is a process that leverages technology to provide enforcement, actionable intelligence, and actual insight. Good description, right? We'll get into the weeds. But we haven't taken to something that seems to be a buzzword at Microsoft, Amazon, AWS, and GCP, DTA. And I think Microsoft has a conference, or used to, called DTA. There's still quite a few legacy, when I say legacy, by virtue of maturity and just existence of companies who still have massive amounts of data on premise, spinning on spindles. Well, everything ultimately spins on spindles, but spinning on spindles in their data center. How do you balance DLP with this digital transformation and file transference to the cloud so that the cloud scale and the cloud reliability provides access to the files almost continuously and instantaneously? Do you have to separate those two things? Are you saying that I need to put DLP on premise, get it all fixed up, and then move it to the cloud, which probably doesn't have any controls? Or do I sit here and say, on premise has been there, let's get the landing point, the target good, I'm going to go ahead and put all these controls, stand it up, do it there, and just move the data and do. What is the methodology? And we'll start with Shlomi and saying, how do I address both of these concerns? I got file servers, man. I got file servers. I got SharePoint on premise. I got stuff, NAS devices. How do I say, okay, do I do it here? Just give me your thoughts about how do I start off?
Great. So first, yes, we do see many of our customers that still hold a lot of sensitive data, huge amounts of sensitive data within the on-premises. And that's why, first, using the same unified policy and same unified sensitive information types and unified DLP that we mentioned earlier, our customers can scan their SharePoint on-premises and their file servers using our scanners. We have introduced dedicated scanners so customers can scan their file servers. That's usually the most popular case of keeping on-premises sensitive data, as well as their on-premises SharePoint. And on the other end, we also mentioned our endpoint DLP controls. And as you guys know, endpoint is not an on-premise versus cloud thing, right? Endpoint is actually the endpoint is somewhere between the on-premise and the cloud. As long as the endpoint is protected and DLP endpoint is enabled, the files that go in and out to this endpoint are also protected. Mm-hmm. So the answer, Edward, is yes, we are providing our on-premises control to scan DLP also on-premise. And of course, the endpoint is the key to every destination.
Okay. So rather than regurgitate that question and Maz and Eric's gonna give a similar question, the next question to you, Maz. Does your product report in Secure Score?
Yes. I mean, Secure Score includes assessments that take into account what controls you have deployed. And actually, it's a great way that we've seen customers discover that they need to put into place the right DLP control. So absolutely. I'd love to see more, and I'd love to see more integration with that, just as it helps customers kind of continue that journey. But absolutely, we've got it covered in there already.
Okay, very cool. Don't get my opinion on Secure Score, right? But we'll move forward with that. So Eric, as we get ready to close the podcast, I'll give the I'll give the closing of the Oscars to you, and then we'll roll back down one more time. So here's 2 questions. Remember, I said it was going to be 2-point question. Shlomi got one, Maz got one. So Eric, you get the last one. Eric, you have 4 products: MDE, MDO, MCAS, and the MDI. Which one are you going to deploy first?
I like the
Microsoft
wording.
Defender for Office 365, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Cloud App Security, Microsoft Defender for Identity. And this is slanted toward which is going to be the best complementing product to what you do.
The real answer and the bottom line answer is I'm deploying DLP first. That's the most important thing I'm doing.
DLP first.
You can't expect me to say anything else other than that.
Well, I mean, I'm just asking, we got guys from MDOs and Trav, MDE probably got MCAS, MDI. The people want answers. So it sounds like you said MCAS. Well, I can go back. It goes back to the notes. MDE was mentioned twice on the call, actually 4 times, because I did it the last 2 times. MCAS was mentioned 11 times. Built-in was mentioned 7 times, and integrated 11.
But we mentioned DLP how many times?
I did not track that because I said I've been a losing
because you ran out of space. I think on this call.
I got enough notes. I've been taking notes the whole time, right, and keeping score. So all right, we'll take it as a non-answer. You're saying that MCAS sucks. I hate MCAS. It should never work. It doesn't do this stuff. I get it. All right.
No, I think ultimately, or customers out there really need to get a sense of what the data they have, and that's probably the most challenging thing. All of these other solutions are great; they address very specific issues, but probably the most sensitive issue that organizations have to deal with today is the data that they have and understanding what the data is that they have. Because in a lot of cases, they don't know what this data is. So you were talking just a moment ago about transitioning to the cloud. One of the biggest hurdles customers have is they have this pile of opaque data on premises, and they have no idea what is in that pile of data. And are they going to migrate to the cloud if they don't know what this data is? No. And would they? Why? Of course not. They shouldn't. Because if you don't know what's going into the cloud, you could be opening up a Pandora's box. You could be uploading credit card data, healthcare data, God knows what, right? And you can potentially expose yourself to some very serious issues. Now, if you can catalog the data, now you can determine your risk. You can say, well, this data here, this group of data, there's nothing sensitive or unique about it that I need to manage in a special way. That's perfectly okay to migrate. This other data, well, that contains some very sensitive information. It's perfectly okay to migrate, but I've got to migrate it to a specific spot on my environment so that it will have all the protections and controls that it needs and all of the enforcement mechanisms. So, without understanding your data, all of these other solutions, I think, are kind of mute because you can't make the right decision as to how you want to enforce a protection if you don't know what you're trying to protect in the first place.
And the risk involved with the data.
And the risk involved with the data. So, Moss, Moss, go ahead. What you got, sir? Tell me what you were like, man, if I wake up in the morning and this has been fixed, my life would be so much better. What can I fix for you so you can wake up tomorrow and be a better person, Moss?
Wow. Do you help with kids and schoolwork? No, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding.
My youngest son would be 30 at the end of the month. So I'm out of the kid rearing.
So, I think the biggest challenge that I hear from customers is they're deploying our solution and kind of the things that I see coming and where I think they need the most help is around that classification of the data. As we said, what is my sensitive data? Where is it and how is it stored? And being able to identify that is a challenge all customers end up needing to face. That's why we have 150 plus sensitive identifiers we build out of the box. But we're also, I'd say, trainable classifiers is a technology, as a solution that I think is going to really help customers deploy at scale. Is that how do you solve that classification problem? How do you make it easier to define what's sensitive so that you don't spend all of your time fine tuning and defining those patterns? And I think I think that's a really, as I said, I'm really happy to see investments we're making to solve that problem. But that's a top of mind area that I think affects and benefits all the MIP suite, the Microsoft Information Protection, set of solutions. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, this has been super informative. We didn't go super deep into it, but that wasn't a goal. It was the goal to understand, here's a platform, here's a technology, here are the general, way about the business of process. Here are the industries that benefit from. Every industry can benefit from it, some more than others. Right. And so this has been super informative. But I haven't asked the most important question. Shlomi, be you. I thought I started with you, but I'm going to end with you. I heard this is free. I can just implement this for free. There is no cost, right? Is that the right answer? It's free? Not free?
He said he did. I thought he said he didn't want to talk licensing. That was the thing that he was passing off on.
Really? Is that what
Yeah.
you said?
Yeah,
Which
I'm
the
happy to
reason
take
that
one.
it's like baseball. When you're not paying attention, the ball finds you.
I'm happy to take that one. That's pretty.
Well, Eric is going to come in. Look at him being a team player.
Hey,
He
we're
gets a
all
point for
here,
team
right?
player.
Yeah,
there you
well,
go.
I'm the marketing guy, so I've got to wear the marketing hat for a moment, right?
Thanks,
so,
Eric.
Oh, of course, Sean. No worries. And so what we're looking at really is kind of two sets of licenses. There's the E3 license, which provides you some built-in capabilities for what I would say the traditional DLP deployment environments.
Did you say E3?
Yeah. And
I'm going to assume that this transposes over to G3 and A3.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Sorry, go ahead.
So E3 will take care of like your SharePoint online, your OneDrive, and your typical office suites, and then and you get MIP with that as well, right? So you get your basic content identification, so you can go in and build your own classifiers, all of that. Now, if you go up to E5, you now have access to endpoint DLP. You have access to Teams chat DLP. And then you also have on-premises DLP. Those are all available as part of that. The other big advantage to E5, especially for MIP, is that you have access to all of the automated classifiers and all of the automated and intelligent tools that help you reduce a lot of the workload. So when we look at E5, the way that I typically think of E3 versus E5 is E3, it's all the tools that you need to get the job done. E5 is includes all the tools you need to get the job done, but with a lot of help that's built in. So a lot of the intelligent stuff, the AI, the machine learning, all of those extra capabilities are available as part of E5.
So it sounds as though E5 gets you the things that you really need. One of the biggest seller points that I had when I used to do compliance and selling of AIP was the automation. You need that with P2, right? Manual and all this other stuff. By the way, big fan of the Azure Information Protection Scanner. You're talking about hit the ground running, put it in, put the nodes in, go into the portal, let that thing scan, PowerShell out some things that you guys are little nuances I'm still having to do. Works like a champ. I love that scanner, especially for large organizations that have storage all over and say, let me just do this and then come back. The only other thing that's made customer eyes get bigger is if I leave MCAS in there for about 45 days and realize they got a TikTok and a Tinder issue going on within their organization, right? So big shout out TikTok and Tinder. Support the show. Always selling. Man, this has been good. The biggest thing is I got 3 new hosts to the show, so Frank and I can take vacation. We always welcome our guys to come host the show. We don't have to be here. We like living too. Anytime that you want to come on and talk about what you have, what you're doing, what you know, what you think we should know, that's great. I've made myself some notes to go into my own lab and turn some of these things on. And I want to. I'm not going to get below 200 feet, right? I'm going to stay right at 200 feet to be able to understand some of the big points right here. Especially love the blocker type stuff. I love the lack of comment on the DPO, DPM. It was sort of like, yeah, we got one, that's good, right? But I'm gonna make up 2 names, IPO and IPM. Secure Score, I did not know. I knew that it was in 365, but I wasn't sure. But in that thing around 365, do you guys do any interaction with Compliance Manager, both the classic and the new one? You do?
So what's the, I'm sorry, I'm trying to interpret the question.
So
Compliance.
does your product interact and have any type of influence or connectivity to Compliance Manager?
I ultimately, yes, Compliance Manager does have, I mean, it leverages, I think, many of the MIP classifiers for GDPR type of data. So there's definitely some sort of cohesion between the different solutions. Of course, its purpose in life is a little bit different, but as I said, it benefits from those same data classifiers and the visibility into how you're protecting your data. If you have the right retention policies in place and whatnot, so that that data is protected properly, is kind of the focal point of the Compliance Manager.
I like it. I mean, the simplest feature in Compliance Manager is to be able to go take a control framework and download to a Excel spreadsheet and then make it seem like you're doing Archer or whatever, all these things that are coming out. I used to cover federal, so CMMC was a big thing, right? You know, even 3 years ago, I knew about this was coming, right? So we started doing it. This has been super. Franklin, do you have any questions, sir?
I'm good.
This is all right. Thank you guys for coming on. Big shout out to Shlomi. He's in Israel. I know he's sleepy. He's tired.
No, I mean, you go to bed at 8 p.m. I mean, people like us, we
You
go
had to
bed
tell
at 3
everybody.
4 a.m. You know, I mean, this is still early for him. What are you talking about?
And
Franklin's
DLP
right.
always keeps me awake, guys. DLP always
Yeah,
keeps me awake.
Franklin's telling the truth. 9:30 for me, but I get up at 4:30, right? This is military. Plus, nobody's bothering me. People, man. Ugh, people. I tell you. Well, gentlemen, with that, we're going to close out the podcast for Microsoft Security Insights.